Well, hello, this is Dr. Stockdale, and I am creating this video to help you do your revisions for your lesson plan number 1, and also to help you with the other lesson plans that you need to write for this class. So the first thing I want to mention is that you need to always put your name on assignments. Simply your name, underscore, the class title, and what it is would be great, because if I ever need to print it out, then it's helpful not to have to go back to the computer and figure out whose paper I have in my hand. So looking at the lesson plan template that I gave you on Blackboard, or I may have shared it with you on the Google Drive, I'm not sure. I've added to it, and I'm going to share this with you. We're going to call the grade preschool, and we're going to call the developmental level of the student, we'll just say Head Start. So just use that. You definitely want to put Roman numeral 1 and all of the words. When you get to your objectives, remember that they must have measurable and observable verbs in them. I'm still seeing people write lesson plans that the student will be able to know or learn or understand something. I think someone put the student will be able to develop a knowledge of. All of those verbs are not measurable or observable because you can't get inside the head of a student. So check out Bloom's taxonomy and Webb's depth of knowledge and find a verb that is measurable and observable. When you start to write your find the appropriate learning standard, and actually this is where you need to probably work backwards. A lot of times I am starting with a standard and write the objective from it. Sometimes I have my objective in mind, and because I'm already familiar with the standards, and so I have to find the exact standard that goes with my objective. You can approach it from either way based on your knowledge of the South Carolina Early Learning Standards. Now, notice here that I've taken out the initials NAEYC. That is because the South Carolina Early Learning Standards are based on the NAEYC learning standards. Just make sure that when you are listing them on your lesson plan that you list the letter or letters and the number that follows the goal. So if you go to the website, which is listed here, you're going to come up with this document, which we've looked at in class, and you are going to copy this entire goal. For example, looking back on the lesson plan, goal ESD-1, children demonstrate a positive sense of identity and self-awareness. Or here's another one as an example to you. Don't just put goal ESD-1. I want to see the words that follow it. And certainly don't simply put social and emotional domain or whatever domain that you're working on. Be very specific. When you list the materials, you do not need to tell me which materials are for the students and which are for the teacher. Although if that helps you, you can do that. Really, all I'm looking for is just a list of materials, things that you will need to gather that before the lesson begins. And so you'll just put a comma between each of the materials. Don't give any explanations. Don't give any procedures here. This is a list of materials. If you're using a book, make sure you use APA format. For example, you would put the book title in italics, followed by the author's last name and the year of publication. So here's the example with The Cat in the Hat. The Cat in the Hat is italicized, Seuss, 1957. If you are struggling with APA format, or if you're using something else other than a book, then you'll need to go to, we're using the 6th edition, maybe now we're on the 7th edition of APA, gosh. But here is the website that I like to recommend, the OWL at Purdue. And if you go to that, it can help you get better with APA format, which you will use through your college career. When you start to write your modifications for English learners, or excuse me, diverse learners, one modification will be for an English learner, and that is listed as ESOL because in South Carolina, the program is English to Speakers of Other Languages. I refer to them as emergent bilinguals, and sometimes you'll hear English learners. But I've already told you, use level 1. So you're going to assume that this is a child who understands and speaks, reads and writes little to no English. That is based on the WIDA Access assessment that we use in our state, and I want you to write one modification for an English learner. You've got 2 PowerPoints that I created for you that list a lot of modifications, so find one that you think is appropriate for an English learner. You also need to write a modification for an exceptional student or a child with a disability. Sometimes you'll hear us refer to students as special education students, or you'll hear of the acronym SPED. But you'll need to state the disability. So if the child has been diagnosed with autism, if the child is visually impaired or hearing impaired, tell me what the disability is and write that modification. Keep in mind that the modifications that you use for an exceptional student may also be a modification for an English learner based on the student's disability, because we've talked about it many times in class that modifications will work for struggling students, even those without disabilities. So see which one you think would work for your particular child that you have in mind. Your procedures are going to take up the majority of your lesson plan, and they need to have the hook, the demonstration, the guided practice, the independent application, and the closure within them. Now, looking at the hook, you need to grab your students' attention. Grab your students' attention. Oops, wrong punctuation. So instead of saying something like, ladies and gentlemen, let's come to the floor and talk about the different types of weather. Well, that's not very engaging. If you, on the other hand, were to put on a raincoat, some rubber boots, and hold up an umbrella, well, that's realia. Those are real things that are going to grab the student's attention and very quickly let them know something about what you're about to teach. Now, some of you in your lesson plans did a beautiful job of grabbing your students' attention with puppets and songs and finger plays, as well as realia, real objects. So if you've got something like that, then keep it. But if you did not include something engaging, change it and make it so that your students want to listen to you and figure out what you're going to do next with them. Now, the demonstration or modeling portion is the I do part, meaning the teacher does. That's where you're going to show the students how something is done. The guided practice is where you and the students are going to do it together. And then the independent application is going to be where the students do whatever it is you're asking them to do independently. So we call that I do, we do, you do. And you want to follow that routine or that pattern. When you get to the closure, sometimes called the transfer, you want to know, did my students get it? How do you know if your students got it? You need to refer back to your objective. What was that verb you wanted them to know? Did you want them to be able to draw a picture of something? Did you want them to be able to act out something or name or talk about or identify? Well, that's what you want them to be able to do at the closure. Very briefly, just very quickly, because your formative assessment is not going to come necessarily during the closure. You're going to be doing your assessment during the independent application part, or a lot of it, because the students are going to be working independently and you're going to be naturally assessing where they are. So moving down to the formative assessment. I say formative because we know that summative assessments are things like end of the unit tests. They're quizzes, they're exams, they are graded assessments. You are not going to be doing any kind of summative assessment. So for 3 examples of formative assessments would be creating a checklist, writing anecdotal records or observations, and creating a rubric. Whatever it is that you choose to do, I want you to create a mock assessment and put it on your lesson plan. I've given you an example of a rubric. So I can look at my rubric here and I can determine basically what my objective was, because I'm going to use the words from the objective inside the rubric. If you decide to do a rubric, on the far left, you're going to call that section meets. This is how we know the student meets the objective. Approaches or develops. Develops means that they are not where you want them to be. You want to get those students approaching and finally to meeting the objective. So looking in this box, student can sing a song, or maybe we'd say student can say a poem. I use both. That probably I would probably limit to one. Student can sing a song from memory, such as the Itsy Bitsy Spider or the Wheels on the Bus, independently, all by themselves. Or they can do that, but they need assistance. That's approaches. Develops would be student cannot sing a song or say a poem from memory. Even with assistance, they can't do it. So I could use this rubric here. If I had extra blanks, I could actually walk around the room with this on a clipboard. I could be observing the children singing, and then I could be writing their names and putting the dates beside when I assess them. Okay. And then finally, I wanted to give you 2 helpful websites. It's on this last page. You do not need to print this out when you do use this as your template. But these websites are from the CDC, and this first one basically gives you checklists for what you might expect of a child at a certain age. Now at Head Start, you are working with mainly 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. So this one, for example, here's a 3-year-old with the milestones. And so this one says, takes turns in games. If your lesson plan is to play a game with a child to see if they can take turns, then that would be appropriate for age 3. That would be something you might want to formatively assess for the social emotional domain. For a child that's 4 years old, sings a song or says a poem from memory, such as Itsy Bitsy Spider, the Wheels on the Bus. So the rubric that I just showed you would be more appropriate for a 4-year-old in the language communication domain. If we're talking about, let me go down to the 5-year-old. So one of your lesson plans needs to be about physical development. Maybe you're going to be doing a game or some activity, and the child is going to be hopping and jumping. Well, a 5-year-old should be able to stand on one foot for 10 seconds or longer. That might be a part of your objective. The child should be able to hop. I don't know that, some of you were talking about here's something with food, using fork and a spoon, and depending on your situation, a table knife. Well, this will give you a good idea of what to expect at what age. This one has pictures and colors and large font. The other website that I'm giving you is the same information. For example, here are the important milestones for a child at the age of 4. But rather than having the pictures and the colors, the large font. This is more of a list. And I believe it gives you examples of each. So you can look at the different videos and the different pictures and just get some ideas of what children at which ages, what they can do. And I think that'll help you write your lesson plans. So I'm going to share this video with you. I'm going to share this template with you. And then I'm going to be watching Blackboard to see your lesson plan number 1 revisions and lesson plan 2 rough drafts, because they are due on March 19th. Your lesson plan 1 revisions are due depending on when I graded your rough draft. And so those will be coming in staggering days. Please email me if you've got any questions. Thanks a lot. Bye.